the Homo sapiens digitalis, and the idea of a set of interviews of Homo sapiens digitalis back in 2005. So this is Homo sapiens digitalis interviews collected under a rubric called the First Contact Project. Okay. And just from the standpoint of flashbackism, that's me a long time ago in this video that you're going to see. That was the studio back then. You'll see Obama's in there, I think, and should make sense. Let's see. Are we playing?
First Contact Project, Part 2. This is Charlie Koulas, inventor, patent lawyer. He was a programmer in the very early days, just like Taman, whom you heard. But even earlier, to be honest.
That's my 2012 self.
With a few others. So yeah, the First Contact Project on Noir TV for the first time. That's cool.
On Noir TV in 2012.
And the computer's there, I see it.
And here in 2020.
But I can't touch it, because these other geeks are in front of me, and they're never going to let me use this thing. And they say, "Oh yeah, if you want to use it, you gotta, use these punch cards." Well, they're not even punch cards; they're like these computer cards that you used to see in the '60s. But you gotta black out the numbers. And so that was the way I was able to program something. Is I took this deck of cards home, and I started to write instructions by blocking out character by character. Like if I wanted to make an A, I'd have to go find the A and block that out. So it's really painful. So I finally finished my little program that was supposed to add numbers together or something like that. And I bring it in, and I stick it in this machine after they let me get to it, late in the hour. And it goes chuk, 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 and it reads everything in, and it's all wrong. Because it's the thing's not very precise. And so it's if I make one little smudge or make the circle the wrong way, it just doesn't detect it. And so I'm looking at this gibberish, and I'm feeling this is not fair. This is the only computer in the whole school. And why do these guys get to tell me, that I can't touch the damn thing? It's basically just a bunch of kids in a room, no adult supervision. And I'm going to start using it, because it should be for everybody, and I should have equal time. So I just get there earlier than they do the next day, and I start to actually use this thing. And from then on, it was this war between me and the main guy, and the other people were kind of his followers, but he didn't like me anymore. Yeah, and he was actually this brilliant guy, and he was writing a chess program to play chess. And so he knew that any little dinky thing I was doing as a new user was never going to be anywhere near as good as what he was doing. I can't remember his name, but he was he had a Russian background. He was American born, but his was a Russian name, Karov or something like that. I can't remember exactly. The weird thing about it is he we each had our little accounts with passwords, and I found out way later after I stopped going to that room that his password was my last name. This is he would do stuff like that. And he would try to whatever I was doing, he would try to make it more difficult for me. He'd sabotage, stuff that you nerds think about. We would try to steal each other's passwords or leave the machine in a state where it'd be difficult for somebody else. It was all BS. But anyway, that was the environment that I started to learn how to program. And
how many computers have you used from that day to today, or owned? Could you even fathom or guess it?
Well, I was programming computers for a good 7 years professionally, and before that, as a kid, I was just doing it for fun. So I'm gonna guess 50 or 60. I have probably 8 right now in my house. I stopped getting rid of the old ones because I noticed this trend where the newer operating systems and software and computers are less private. They have they didn't used to have machine IDs until the early 90s, where now they can figure out each CPU has got a number in it that people can read. So they know and they can track that back to a machine that I bought, for example. So I don't have privacy. But they didn't start doing that at a certain point. So I have my old machines, and if I ever want to be anonymous, I use that old machine like that.
Use your system through that machine.
Yeah, I can still get on the internet by dialing up because there's no Ethernet card in these. But But yeah, I regret getting rid of like the machines I had in the 80s. And I had an Apple II for a while. I had the TRS-80 that you mentioned in your chapter. I programmed both of those machines. I programmed tons of IBMs. I programmed mainframes, mini frames, mini computers, everything. That was Maine Township East in Illinois. And people probably don't think about Illinois as being, cutting edge computer, but that's
Well, Mark Andreessen, right? I mean,
they all came, all those internet guys. By the way, I wrote patents for them too. They came from University of Illinois. That's where they developed the web. It's also where they were developing a lot of the early computer components, like the UNIVAC was developed. I think it was UNIVAC. The ELIAC was definitely developed there, and also, I mean, it's kind of known in the computer industry as being like a think tank, and talented computer people come out of there. And that's why it's mentioned in 2001: A Space Odyssey. The HAL computer that's getting shut down, but it was made in Urbana, Illinois, which is the University of Illinois, which is where I went to school, and a lot of these people come from.
My first memory of a computer was, I must have been 6 or 7, and we were visiting friends of my parents in North Carolina, actually, and he was a professor and had this little Macintosh. I don't know what, it was about this big, maybe 1985 or so, 6. And he showed me the mouse and how it worked, and I drew pictures using the mouse as a 6-year-old or 7-year-old would draw. And then they showed me this program that when you type, it could speak. It was actually really advanced for what it was, 1986. So you could type and it would speak in this robot voice, and that was really cool at the time, I remember. And then they printed out on whatever kind of printer, dot matrix, I suppose, my drawing. And that was a really big deal. So that was my first computer experience. About 7, I would guess. 7 years old. And the first computer that we had was a Tandy, which is the Radio Shack brand, which was just a step up from the Commodore 64, but before the whole PC thing, IBM. And I don't know, it was a Tandy. I was like 10 or so at the time, so I don't remember. It was definitely DOS based. It was the very first introduction to DOS, which later became MS-DOS, but wasn't at the time. Gray, and the screen was black with orange. It was black and orange.
black screen with
Orange type, yeah. So it was all text-based, but they had some kind of cool text-based games, like little H's that you had to move around, and it was all using asterisks and making graphics with the text, which was fun.
Did you program?
Did I program at age 10? No. I think a little bit later in school, they taught us some basic programming. But not really. The first real graphic game we had was a Sierra game called something about Mixed Up Mother Goose, I believe it was. It was obviously aimed towards me and my younger brothers, where you had to move this little square-headed pixel guy various places. So it was two-dimensional. It was pretty advanced. And picking up fairy tale and nursery rhyme pieces and moving them around. That was the first exciting game that we had.
How many machines do you think you've owned?
Maybe 10 or 12 probably by now. We've gone through a lot of computers and computers that I've had at school and at work, different work environments. Quite a few. Dave has Macs, I have PCs, so getting bilingual, I suppose.
Experience with the internet?
The first experience was at sort of a camp that we did. I was probably 13 or 14, and this was one of the workshops, was the internet. And again, completely text-based, but the big deal was he showed us, well, you can search for anything, like a recipe for banana split. And so we typed this in and it comes up with a recipe and everybody oohs and ahs. I don't know what the search engine was, maybe Gopher or something back then, but I wasn't as impressed as I probably should have been at the time because this was a big step, but I didn't quite grasp the enormity of this. I remember the pre-Windows environment. In fact, I was sort of refreshed with it because my computer, one of the computers at my previous job, was rather ancient, and it was the one that ran the cytometers for counting cells. So they haven't updated it because these things are really expensive. And it had DOS. And I was sort of suddenly remembered all of these old commands and all the different, like the /p so that I could see different files. Just the DOS stuff.
The Commodore was like,
Back with me because each disk, the 5-inch floppy, whatever it was, would have written on it how to start the program, which is usually like California game or something like that. Run, quote, star, quote, comma, 8, colon, 1, and whatever we typed wouldn't work. And she would just try different things, like question mark, asterisk, like typing thing. And none of them sometimes won't work. And there must have been some kind of logic to it, but since it wasn't my computer, I could never figure it out myself, and she obviously had no clue. So I just, to this day, I can't do Commodore commands. They don't make any sense to me. It's a DOS girl. I think I was young enough when the first computer that I saw, I knew that it was exciting, but I didn't understand what it was. And because that just sort of, as I cognitively sort of advanced, there were more and more computers around and just grew with it. It seems more organic, just makes sense to me that the computers, I never thought about it consciously until now. My name's Emily Reed and I'm 26.
These interviews are in 2005.
He's followed
The
up by
first time I
a Commodore
had
guy.
a computer, the first computer I had or experienced was the Commodore VIC-20. And I remember as my parents were arguing that I was watching too much TV, so they got rid of the television and they bought a computer, the VIC-20. Oh, that had to be like 1983, 1984 back then. And it ran software. You had a cassette, audio cassette that stored data on, like you store data on a CD-ROM nowadays, and it was an audio cassette, and it had this this cassette player, but it wrote and read data off of audio cassettes. And we would get this magazine, Byte, B-Y-T-E, and you could order cassettes out of it. And they also had whole programs that you could type in. They were on the page of the magazine, and type them in, and you'd have a simple, crude game at the end, or a drawing from a very simple, where you could draw a line. And it didn't have a mouse. It had arrow keys and did have a joystick, but it was mainly a keyboard. So, did they have machines in school? In my grade school, they did not have machines until I was in junior high. So not until I was in junior high. But I think did they have Apples? I think they had Apple II GSs or something like that. I had the Commodore 64, and my dad was kind of a computer freak because he's an engineer. Then we had Commodore, VIC-20, the +4. Then I moved on to the Commodore 64. Then I got a Commodore 128. Commodore Amiga, that was my favorite machine at the
That was
time.
like Tamman earlier.
Then I had a IBM 386, and then I stopped using them for a couple of years until I got a job
Common themes.
in 1996 at a computer lab in a school here. The internet was just starting, so about that time I was always on the internet. And then I got a systems engineering job during the .com boom, and bought a Pentium 200, and then from there I just have upgraded that. Actually, now it's running like 3.4 gigahertz with tons of hard drive and memory and a video card that has more 256 megs of RAM, and I also have a Mac iBook at home which I use. Mark Heller, and I'm 29.
Again, these are in 2005. These interviews are in 2000.
When I was a kid, I was about 10 or 11. Let's see. So I was born in 58, so this is 69, 70, something like that. You went to the Lawrence Livermore Lab in Berkeley, in the hills of Berkeley, which is a radiation laboratory. And there was a guy in a room, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a computer and a handheld computer. And he was running every possible computation on it to see if there was an error anyplace. And he found one. It was like some decimal point of multiplication that the thing was screwing up at. And we got to play with it and punch our fingers on it and stuff and add things. And so that was the first time I saw a computer. There were places that had the big weird computers, but not in that room. It was just like a guy sitting at a table with a little handheld. I mean, the first time I used one, I was, let's see, in my 20s. And I had to make a computerized design for a sign so that I can send it off to the manufacturers to have a silkscreen done. So it was the first time I ever did it. It was SE, Macintosh SE. Remember those? Yeah. It was Aldous Freehand before Adobe bought them. And the SEs, they had those little funny little screen, black and white, no color. I can't remember. I didn't know enough about it to know like how many megabytes of memory it had or anything like that. It's a long time ago. And I was a total junkie then. I remember being so high when I was doing it. Just sat there and was like, whoa. John Fidef, age 46.
Yeah, so that's the
So
first.
we're listening to the First Contact project, and the first two people are all over 30, I believe. Some in their 40s, and their memories are much more about physical things regarding the changes in early computing. And these next few interviews here in part 3 are all people who are under 30, and so they grew up with computers in the home and in their schools. And so I want to make this distinction, an introduction to part 3 here, because I think you'll notice something different here. And that's what I was hoping to find when you compare such things. So this is the First Contact project, part 3.
I remember it was being my 6th grade classroom, and it had 2 lines of computers running alongside the walls. And the first program I ever played on was the Oregon Trail one. And I remember that the M was used for firing the rifle, and the N was used for doing something else. And you use the arrows to move the little person. And you can get like dysentery. That's the first time I actually knew what dysentery meant, because during the Oregon Trail, you could get dysentery and die, or one of your cows could get it, So you're like, why did it die? And I was, I think 12, 13. I mean, I'm 24 now, so you do the math. I think it was like nearly 3. And I remember it was the blinking green line that was always going on in the upper left-hand corner. It was always going on, bing, bing, bing. And then the first time I typed, that they had this program in which we would have computer classes. And the computer class was only to type the words per minute, how many words per minute you could type, how fast you could type, and it was to achieve like 60 words per minute or something like that. And I would always be like 20 words per minute, and that was like me cheating, not using my index finger. So yeah, that's how I learned how to type. There were Macs. Apple? Is that the same thing? Apple. Yeah, they had the little Apple emblems, I remember. And they were green. They were always green. It's like black screen with green letters. And the keyboards were really hard. They're not like the spell types that they have now, So yeah. And the hard disks were the things that you pushed in. It was just like it was more like, well, the floppy disks were a little bit bigger, and they were harder. And I remember the computers being like eggshell white. They were never like gray or these like, corporate neutral colors, pleasant for the eye. It was kind of like this weird, dirty, white looking thing. Yeah.
This Oregon Trail.
My teacher was the one that let us play it, and when we would behave, he would let us play it. And it's Oregon Trail is all about you're in this wagon, you have to buy ammunition, you have to buy food supplies, you have to buy water, and then you have to make the Oregon Trail, like all of it, get alive there. And you go and you either have children while you're going through it, or your children die, your spouse dies, one of your children, Susie dies, and you're like, you forgot you had a child, and then you go on these hunting trips, and you hunt for buffalo. So you kill buffalo, rabbits, foxes, or birds. So when you're running out of food, if you hunt, you can bring X amount of pounds of food with you.
It's amazing to think about,
I'm not sure. I don't know if it still exists.
And there's a girl in
Sometimes
Mexico.
You could get shot. Someone could get
And
shot.
what's amazing is
But
you're
you
going to hear
couldn't
another person describe.
like they would tell you, I think like your daughter Susie got shot by like Chris Arambo killed your daughter.
Westward expansion put into a video game for
I'm 24.
The first time I remember using a computer was in 6th grade of middle school. That was Buena Vista Middle School, San Francisco, California. And it was actually in the computer lab. They were Apple IIe's. And I was playing Oregon Trail, which was the best video game at the time. It was awesome. I don't think I ever beat it though.
Mexico,
I died many times.
USA.
I was sitting there playing.
Kids in the
There was
USA,
a computer
kids in Mexico,
teacher
both
who
playing the
explained,
game.
like how to get to
Idolizing
the,
white people,
video
killing
game
natives and
program,
buffalo
Oregon
as
Trail
they expand
program. I mean, keep in mind, this was
to
education.
Oregon.
This wasn't just playing video games. This was learning about the pioneers.
Learning about the
And,
pioneers.
how America was formed or something. 6th, God, that's really a hard thing. Okay, maybe 19. No, I think I was like 11 or 12. I was born in 1982.
So around 93.
In 94, yeah.
So they're 12-year-old kids.
That was when it was. Or pioneers or whatever, and you were doing the Oregon Trail across the country, and it was all about like how you had to like trade for items, and people died of disease, and or you got attacked by Indians, I think, at a couple points, and there was like different like various things where you had to like forge across rivers, and like it was ridiculous. I think it still actually exists. I mean, I remember when my little sister showed me like a super teched out version of the game, like where it was all like really like modern and fancy. But it was I think she had to do it for school, or maybe she had it on the computer that she had. He's 6 years younger than me, so I was like, wow, I can't believe that's still a video game. And that was like the first. I mean, like we didn't use computers on a regular basis. Like we still, we wrote on paper and everything. But then like we had a computer class and we played Oregon Trail. That was it. Antonio Romano Alcala, age 22.
I know that my aunt had a computer before I had one in my house, and I'm sure that I used it or interacted with it in some way. But the first time I really remember interacting with a computer it was an Apple II, but the monitor was a television screen. and you could put in floppy disk program like game. And so I played Oregon Trail and
That's three
Where in
different
the
people.
World is Carmen Sandiego
Where those come
over and over and over again. It was at my house. It was like little
The beginning of
computer setup
Upspeak.
in my room. And
Can you remember about how old you were?
I was probably 5, 6.
And roughly what year that would be?
That would be like the late 80s, like 87 to 88, I think. The first computer I had, I was, like 5 or 6, and it was in my room. I just remember I would always play these games, and I played Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego because there was also a television game show of the same thing, and I watched the game show. But the thing with the game was that after a while, I learned all of the answers. There would be these sort of clues that were like Carmen is in the capital of Argentina. Where is she? And then there'd be like A, B, C, D, and you'd have to like guess where she was, or you would go to that place, and if she was there, you would be like, she's there, and you would get like another clue, or it would be wrong, and you'd have to like retrace your steps. And eventually, I just learned all the prompts and all the answers. It was just really comforting to kind of sit there and go through these like really basic familiar things and sort of just like watching reruns, Yeah, it was my computer. I think it was a hand-me-down from someone, which is why I had the television as the monitor.
You remember being an Apple II?
It was either an Apple II or an Apple II Plus. It was the kind that was flat, and the keyboard was sort of trapezoid, and the keyboard was attached to the computer, and then the monitor sat on top of it. And it was just black and green, really low pixel quality.
Did you get a Mac in your house?
We've always had Macs. I think we got our first Macintosh when I was 13, so that'd be 95.
And this is 2005,
And then now I just have the iBook laptops.
or perhaps 6.
Kind of try to get the memory of that moment.
The very first time I used a computer, I really don't remember. It seems to me like they were kind of always there in some capacity, just which might have come from growing up in Silicon Valley. It was always this thing that was happening. I can remember having email at a really young age. I can remember when the internet began, and so I think that
This is great because the beauty of this is that we have now a person for whom there is no first contact. They were always around. There's only a handful of these interviews. You can find them on the playlist that is marked First Contact Project. I'm going to go ahead and end this because we're approaching a half hour. I don't know why I got off onto this tangent. Oh, because I was reading that New Yorker article about the Israeli fellow. Man, that guy seems a little bizarre, but he mentioned the idea of a new species, that Homo sapiens would no longer be as it is. And I was like, hey, I wrote about that 8 years ago. And so I recorded that. You can hear it on the previous one. It's called Pre-Internet Baccalaureate and Homo sapiens digitalis. And that is whom we have been interviewing.